Alright, this week's anime has already been opened up on account of the fact that One Piece was in there, and, you know, this is a high priority watch with my Friday friend. So let's get started. This is, One Piece Season 13 Voyage 1. This is pretty straightforward, where we've got the Blu-ray and DVD disc 1, Blu-ray DVD disc 2s. Yeah, not much there since, that was already open. Next we have Obey Me, the anime, Season 2. I don't remember Season 1. Oh, it's different underneath the cover. That was good. Still held bound to the mayhem. I see your regions A and B down there. And itty bitty text, so I'm not going to look too much further. Here, I see that there's quite a bit of plastic on this part of the model. Did I get it? I guess? No, there's still plastic there for sure. Oh well. I guess I'll just toss that down there like I usually do. 12 episodes on one disc, so it's most likely subtitled only. Intriguing. Next up we have Recycle of the Penguindrum. I think this is maybe a movie version of the Penguindrum series, but I'm not sure. I know I saw it on something, probably on High Dive, and I was definitely curious, but I never did get around to watching it, so. Let's see. This is region A only. That's English dub and Japanese with English subtitles. Your train is a survival tactic. I love you. So, 2 parts. Pretty straightforward. Last but not least, Executioner and Her Way of Life. I thought it was The Executioner and Her Way of Life, but, it feels weird. Like I felt something shifting around inside, so I'm guessing I've got some loose discs. I do believe this was on High Dive, and I was curious about it. It was on my list of things to potentially check out, and I didn't. Oh, no wonder it feels weird. I can see it's a little smashed there. Should be interesting on the inside, because it feels misshapen. Whatever I do want to be careful about not damaging the discs. In theory, especially since, this is Blu-ray. A pretty standard Blu-ray case, I think. This plastic is just being annoying. Oh yeah, I might be able to replace this in the future. And I've thought that about a lot of damaged stuff, but it's a curiosity. The show, I mean. But, the Isekai Must Die. See, I see this has an English dub, region A. Camera wasn't focusing on it there, but oh well. Feels like the plastic is still loose in there, but the discs are not anymore. Anyways, I know it's a small update, but here's this week's anime Blu-ray collection. No, there's a DVD. Here's this week's anime DVD collection update. Alright, since it's the reason that, the package got opened earlier, and y'all don't get to see that part of it, if y'all even care about that part of it, I could see reasons why you would want it. Let's begin by talking about One Piece, because I did watch all of this with my Friday friend. Do I have any strong thoughts on it? I mean, it's not
bad. It's maybe not the greatest. I do like that Carrot is around. I think that's her name. The bunny girl. I'm glad she's around because she's been kind of fun. If I remember correctly, in the previous volume, I particularly had high praise. This time, I don't think it was as much there, but it was still entertaining. Interesting characters, interesting setups. Hard to say if it's stuff that I care the most about, but One Piece kind of comes in waves like that, I think. And you never quite know when something's going to build up into something that you're like, oh, wow, that's pretty awesome. So, overall, I guess it was entertaining, but I'm not sure if I have too much else to say about it. Okay. And then the smorgasbord of stuff that I've watched. Obviously, I haven't watched the first episode of every new series that's coming out that I'm planning on checking out. Because, like, tomorrow, Helk comes out. You know, the first episode of Helk comes out. And I'm curious about that one. But, you know, beyond that, I might have my list of stuff. I guess we'll have to see what all is actually there. What all is actually aired, I guess. Or finishes or whatnot. Basically, like, the first thing on my list over here is Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts, episode 12. And that was actually a pretty damn good episode. I mean, the show has kind of gotten the reputation. You know, you watch it and you're like, okay, well, it's dealing with some stuff that's interestingly dark. But I would say episode 12 touched on one of the darker concepts that it did. And I really liked the way our main character handled it and approached it. I actually did cry it just a little bit because I was kind of touched by episode 12. It was a pretty good episode, I would say. And, you know, that was episode 12, and I'm wondering, was that supposed to be a season finale, a core finale? Probably not a series finale. I don't remember if it said, like, there's a next episode or if it even did that sort of stuff. Some anime don't tell you. Which is why I'm not quite sure how much longer it's going to be airing. It may already be done. And if it is, that'd be kind of unfortunate because I am looking forward to seeing what continues to happen beyond the point where it was at. Kamikatsu, Working for God in the Godless World, episode 12. That definitely was an end of the thing. Holy shit. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, and it's such a very... I think it's something of a season finale. I think it's supposed to be a season finale. And what a Kamikatsu season finale. It's kind of got some of the hallmarks of it, where the storytelling is a little weird. There's elements of it that work out kind of well, but otherwise it's kind of crazy. But for some reason it doesn't feel like badly designed crazy. Like, the tractor scene, I think, has been posted by some people in some places. That one's fun and funny. It's horrible, but it feels like it was very deliberately done to kind of be wonderful and horrible at the same time. Kind of wonderful in its horribleness to a certain degree. And I wouldn't say episode 12 had anything that was quite that classic and memorable. That scene was so stupid in a good way. But, yeah, it definitely, there was a lot of stuff that happened in this. Tonally, it felt like there were the right elements in there. Something weird about the pacing. But at the same time, there were a couple of very brief things it did where I'm like, wait, what is this series implying? You know, again, it's Kamikatsu. If you watch it up to this point, I think you kind of understand. It's got these strange curves to it that are just interesting. And so for what we got, it was entertaining. I don't know that you could probably watch it and say, oh yes, I feel like I got a good quality story per se. But there was an interesting story in there with all of the stuff it did. Very strange series. Let's see, first episode of Reborn as a Vending Machine, I Now Wander the Dungeon, episode 1. Well, that title's a lie, because they're not wandering the dungeon, are they? Oh... I mean, it makes it sound like they are doing it themselves, but I guess they're kind of technically with someone, I suppose. An entertaining first episode. I wouldn't say it's like compelling, but it wasn't as nothing burger as I was afraid it might feel like. Like, it just feels like an isekai, and maybe it's actually a good to decent one. It's hard to tell. First episode was just a fine setup episode, I would say. I mean, it did a little more setup than some other shows that tend to be a little slower, I think. But at the same time, you know, I mean, our main character doesn't have quite that much autonomy because they are a vending machine, right? And so, given that they were setting that up, it turned out to not be as bad. Like, they found an interesting middle ground between two ways of handling that. One of those which would be the very frustrating way of saying, okay, he's just a vending machine and all he's doing is sitting there watching and making commentary, and that's not so entertaining, I think. I mean, maybe people could make that entertaining, but that sounds to me like a recipe to create something that gets boring really fast. Like, if you depend too much on your main character talking, and that's all the show really gives you, then it might not feel that well. But, of course, we know that some shows like... So I'm a Spider, So What? We're actually pretty good, even though it was actually pretty heavy on that. So, but I think most of that is because the main character was autonomous still in that one. This one, you know, I think that would be completely bad if they just had absolutely no autonomy and whatsoever. It was really just their internal monologue the whole time. But at the same time, if they were a vending machine, but they could just talk, then that would be weird. Like, it works in Reincarnated as a sword because, you know, he's kind of, as a sword, very autonomous as well. Like, he's not just sitting around doing nothing. He's a completely independent sword that, you know, is basically working with a person. So, you know, its rules are set up pretty well such that that one, you know, there's a lot of autonomy. But him as a talking sword makes sense as a companion. If he was a vending machine in this anime and just kind of walking around or just talking normally, it'd feel weird. You know, I think you need to establish the rules, and it's found a middle ground in between those that I think makes it feel okay for now, and just mostly a curiosity of where it's about to go, I suppose. Next up, Undead Murder Farce, episode 1. I would say it's a really great first episode. The two main characters, I mean, there's a couple more characters introduced, one of which is a notable support character, I suppose. But a lot of the episode is driven by the interaction between those characters. Not all of it, but kind of just the interaction, the setup, and the stuff. And it had some pretty damn compelling dialogue, I would say. And I think what makes it work is it's a bit of a dance between the two of them, where the show's introducing interesting, unexpected, and thoughtful things each of them is saying, and it's not one of those conversations where, oh, one person knows everything and they're kind of leading the conversation. It flows back and forth. And so, again, it's a lot like a dance, and it works out. Setting up these characters, their interactions with each other just feels neat. What the implications of that... Basically, it sets them up well. They're more interesting, more complex characters than you might even initially think there. And they're maybe not complex in the way that you would think hearing that statement, which is what makes them very interesting. So, you know, I'd say a really good first episode. Now, what it does with that really depends. You know, it could very easily stumble. But I have high hopes that it's going to be a good series because it started off on the right foot. Let me see. We have The Great Cleric, episode 1. That's right. Some of this stuff is set up. okay, I suppose. It's hard to tell where it's going to be going as a series. It may be pointing to certain things already in episode 1, and it's hard to say if they will be great or not. So I guess we'll have to find out. But for the most part, a pretty okay first episode. Again, this is a series. We're gonna have to see more episodes to really tell for that one, I think. Maybe sort of similar. The most heretical last boss queen from villainous to savior, episode 1. So compared to other anime, it's definitely a lot like that one that kind of started me watching these kinds of shows. The one where she also, she hit her head at a young age and realized she was the villainess in a game, and she becomes kind of an innocent, ignorant, free spirit sort of person that's, preparing for an inevitable thing, but, kind of unintentionally righting her wrongs, so to speak. And so this one kind of feels like you could probably describe the beginning of the show very similarly. Like, not some of the details I gave, but you could describe it similarly. And I guess so far it just feels like there's maybe a tonal difference between the two of them. Like, that older show, and I can't remember the names too well. I do know that 1 or 2 seasons came out on Blu-ray DVD. That older show had a thing where she just kind of unintentionally, because she was an inherently good-spirited, good-natured person, fixed stuff. But for the most part, her role as a villain was to just kind of be a bitch, I guess. Just a kind of a counter to the main hero at the later part in the life. This one, she calling what her as a villainess was supposed to be a bitch would probably be putting it lightly. It seems to me like she was an absolutely cruel and evil person that really did mess things up, to the point where she wasn't just like, once she gets cleared out of the way, then all of a sudden, the heroine and whatever is good. I think she's literally like someone that needs to be defeated or something in the original story or game or whatever. So it's interesting to see if this show will be entertaining, because it will tonally approach the Atomic game / story elements a lot more hiccups. More interestingly. So, again, a lot of thoughts on the first episode. Not a bad first episode, I would say. Just curious where it's going to go from there. Let's see. I watched the first episode of the new Rurouni Kenshin. It's a remake of the original story. I'd say original story is in like, so there was the story of Rurouni Kenshin, or the anime Rurouni Kenshin that aired back in the 90s or whatnot. And this is very clearly that same anime, but kind of done in a newer style, and maybe worth it, because tonally I'd say it's more in line with some of the stuff that came after Rurouni Kenshin, which was probably tonally more in line with the original source material, if I were to guess. Which is to say that, the original 90s anime was kind of it felt slightly goofy, slightly lighthearted, etc. And there's still slices of that in this one, but this one was also, I think, a slightly more serious period drama, so to speak, to a certain degree. And I think that's it's probably worthwhile to revisit just to see if you can get that show totally working right. Now, whether or not the pacing will feel okay or not, I can't really say for certain. But, first episode, it's okay start. Let's see. Next up, Reign of the Seven Spellblades, Episode 1. It's an interesting setup. You can kind of watch it and feel a little bit of the Harry Potter inspiration sort of stuff for it. And, you know, same thing with the Mashle, of course. It's like, and I'm babbling. What did I want to say? Because I knew that you could sort of feel some of that stuff there. At the same time, you could feel how it was obviously, you know, not just like a copy of it or anything, but, you know, there's inspirations in there, and our characters are doing... I'm trying to remember exactly all that happened. It introduced our handful of characters, and I thought they were all introduced okay enough. It was actually kind of interesting and entertaining. I feel like our main character is a main character and is very notable, but at the same time, they're not overdone or anything like that, to the point where it's like, yeah, they're the one that kind of came up with an interesting idea in the first episode conflict thing that came up. And there's a lot of potential there for this to be interesting. The thing that confused me, it's Reign of the Seven Spellblades, and I got the impression it's only introduced 6 characters. So it makes me wonder what it's planning to do. But overall, an entertaining first start. We have to see what it's going to do after the first episode to know if it's going to be good or not, completely. Let me see. My unique skill makes me OP even at level 1, episode 1. I think I would call it a cute beginning. Like, it's not bad per se. There's some convenient stuff set up there for sure. But at the same time, I feel like the first episode has an emphasis on... I guess an emphasis on kind of the interactions of the characters in a way that's a little more heartwarming, possibly. Maybe not incredibly so, but I think it leans slightly more that way. Kind of curious where it's going to go from there, because I'm not sure if it did enough stuff to definitely tell what it's going to do, I guess. But I'm, you know, it's a kind of off to a start. I wouldn't... I could say it's maybe one of the weaker things I've started so far. But unlike some of the stuff last season, or maybe the season before, that I was like iffy about whether or not I would finish watching them or continue watching them, so far this one has felt better. Which basically means of the stuff I'm watching, the lowest low is higher than the lowest low of the previous season, at least. Which, I don't know if that means much or not. We'll have to see more episodes and find out. Am I actually the strongest? Episode 2. Entertaining stuff happened in that episode, I suppose. I guess it established some of that stuff, but how do I feel about it as a whole going forward, I guess? Not sure. Not sure what it's planning to do. I'm still waiting to see where it's specifically going, because it's setting some ideas up, but I'm not sure if those ideas are telling a whole lot in terms of where it's definitely going to go. But definitely had some neat moments in it. Want to see more to say for certain what it's going to be like. Next up we have Classroom for Heroes, episode 1. I'd say it was a kind of fun first episode. Unfortunately, it's hard to tell what it as a series is going to be like beyond that point. Especially since, you know, the first episode introduced a character that, you know, I've used this word just earlier to describe characters, and I think this first episode of this series is kind of why that word got stuck in my mind. I don't know how you could call the red-haired lady anything but oh my god, she's a bitch. I mean, she's cute in an anime way, of course, but she is still like 95% bitch. It's like, Jesus Christ. But it was a part of an important character arc for her that kind of sets up that a lot of that initial stuff from the first episode is not 100% what we would expect from episode 2. But what are some of the problems with her? You know, she's the first person that's just say absolutely rude thing to our main character that kind of betrays an assuming she understands the state of things without actually having done any confirmation of things, even though she's saying, and I say all that, but the truth of the matter is even though insufferable characters like that can make it really hard to watch in an anime, our main character handles it all like a champ, and that makes it a lot better. It's kind of similar to, you know, like a lot of shows are like, oh, let's make this character feel pain over and over again. Sometimes it can just be too cringe to watch. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, you're having this person get hit in the face with a fucking cannon, but they laugh every time it happens because it means nothing to them. You know, that makes it not as bad of a thing. You know, it all comes down to, it's not fun to watch characters suffer, and this show, it didn't really feel like it was making characters suffer. Definitely kind of curious where it's going to go, but with all the interesting setup in episode 1, I definitely can't tell you I have any idea what this series is going to be like going forward, because it set itself up to, I guess, have a lot of stuff resolved or something like that. I don't know how to describe it. So I'm kind of curious where it's going to go. Next up, Jobless Reincarnation, Season 2, Episode 1. Like the Episode 0 in-between thing that kind of caught us up on certain other characters, or at least one other character. You know, that was a thing, and it's hard to tell how much relevance that will have to Season 2 so far, but this was a pretty depressing episode just because of where Rudius was at as a person at the end of the previous season. And it's like, it's not something that's end of the world kind of bad, but it's one of those things where it's just like, on a personal level, you just really feel, I don't know, kind of sad and depressed alongside the main character, because like, you understand why he feels the way he feels, and Season 2 is beginning with him still dealing with that, basically. And I don't remember enough details about Season 1 to say for certain that I have a good grasp of what Season 2 Episode 1 was exactly doing, but it definitely wanted to start in that place where it's just like, oh, yeah. It's making me feel depressed thinking about it again. Well, that's what it was like when I was watching the episode. Right now, I'm definitely not as bad, if you could call it bad. Maybe there was some of the character setup and interaction that felt just a little bit off, but nothing too off-putting. It was just good, and I think some of the things that maybe felt slightly off could be explained by things that the show didn't tell us, which would be fine. And I don't want to elaborate too much, but, you know, off to an okay first start. I guess I'm not entirely sure what direction it's going to be going, but I think Jobless Reincarnation is a series with a bit of a meandering sort of story, where Rudius is especially living his day-to-day life as he goes, and while there is an overarching story, the story isn't very comic book or fairy tale or directed, so to speak. It does feel like he's just kind of going with the flow of whatever he's having to deal with at the moment. And there are bigger overarching questions that still haven't been answered, but I wouldn't expect those to be answered at the first episode of the second season. And then, speaking of depressing, Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, Episode 1. It was kind of a grueling in a good way first episode. And maybe I say this because as somebody that's been, you know, going into work for a couple of decades now, not exactly, but close enough, I can say I understand some of the basic sentiment expressed there. The thought of, I'm so tired all the time. It would be nice if, you know, this time I just didn't wake up in the morning. You know, those are thoughts that I very understand. And if you're curious, I think I mentioned before that I've probably been, you know, under some form of depression for quite a long time, but I keep stepping forward. Basically, for me, getting lost means, well, I guess it's just keep taking steps forward. And so I just want y'all to make sure you understand that, you know, I'm saying these things because, you know, I'm not about to off myself in any way, shape, or form. I just understand the sentiment because, damn, if I've felt that before. It's like, how many months until I take PTO again? And, you know, it begins with that. The entire premise of the show is it begins with that, but then the zombie apocalypse happens, and he feels relieved. And he's in a much worse situation than anything I've described, because he's working for an exploitative company. He even watches shows about it. It's like justifying to himself why he's not working for one, but it's definitely a company designed to exploit its workers in the worst way possible. And, you know, that's why he's still pretty young. Like, I think he's only been working at the company for 3 years, and maybe it's his first company out of high school or something like that. Don't know, that the ages don't feel like they line up, but whatever. The point is, you know, he's still young. He's still in 24, but he's already been drained up and used. And, you know, he used to be a jock in high school, so he's very athletically capable. So when the zombie apocalypse happens, he's just having the time of his life. It's very interesting how all the zombie gore sort of stuff is painted in a rainbow of colors. To a certain degree, it makes it feel like, you know, I'm going to have to watch this show under the feeling of, like, what if he actually is comatose and having a just before he dies delusion or something like that? It doesn't feel like it is definitely that way. Like, you can take the zombie apocalypse concept very accurately at face value, but it is also one of those things where, you know, you just feel that. And, you know, even on top of the initial setup, it's a actually pretty engaging first episode. Hard to say where the series is going to go from that, but great first episode, with the only problem, which maybe brings it down to a good first episode, being that, you know, you watch it and you're like, okay, I need to see a couple more episodes to know if this is something that I'm going to enjoy watching for the rest of it. It's hard to tell, but, you know, really interesting to get another zombie apocalypse anime. Those are pretty rare, and definitely curious to see where it's going to go from there. Let's see, Dark Gathering, episode 1. An interesting first episode. A coworker of mine was saying that he had heard that some of the characters are mean-spirited and not nice, and I would agree that, you know, 1 or 1.5, it's really hard to tell. Characters are definitely in that category. And that definitely weighs up against the fact that it's still a very curious setup. It's hard to tell if this is going to be something I enjoy watching episode to episode, but it kind of revealed things about all 3 of the characters that just kind of make you go, oh. Just kind of worried in some way about everyone and everything. And I guess that just means that there's some very interesting ideas going on in here, and I think whether or not it continues to be watched depends on the character chemistry, which is a bit volatile here in the first episode, but not necessarily unmanageable. And again, what it's going to do episode by episode. Like, if it's a supernatural mystery followed by supernatural mystery followed by supernatural mystery, that could work. If it's stuff where it's just like, I guess it's the next monster of the weekend, I'm not feeling too attached and the episodes are hit or miss, you know, it could easily be a series that gets dropped, but it's really hard to tell. Again, because it had interesting things about all the characters, I'm still very curious about it. So, off to a good start. Or an okay start. Well, somewhere in there. Next up, Sweet Reincarnation, episode 3. You know, again, a really weird thing where 2 episodes came out last week. So episode 3 came out this time. And I think we saw some of the conclusions from the events in the previous episode, and where it was definitely kind of going as a concept from there. Now, we do have a far destination in the future for the show. We just, at the moment, I'd say at the end of episode 3, we don't have a good feel for how that journey is going to feel given the aimed at destination, because the show's a little inclined to almost make that a bit of an afterthought. And I think I described the same last week. And it's not like episode 3 didn't end with a thing saying, well, I'm kind of definitely curious what the next episode is going to bring us. But I don't know. We still have a little bit to go. And then finally, Level 1 Demon Lord and One Room Hero, Episode 2. Which I would say was a pretty amusing episode. So it's definitely a bit of a slice of life with a very weird twist sort of thing. A very, very weird twist. And along those lines, it's continuing to be amusing. I think I mentioned last week being a little bit confused on what the Demon Lord is exactly supposed to be, because I thought the show was a little ambiguous. And this episode felt less ambiguous in that regard, in that the secretary character very clearly referred to them, in the subtitles at least, as him, his lordship, etc. And that could have been that could have been a translation choice, and maybe that translation choice was actually informed by slightly more. It's really hard to say because in English the word him, his, etc., it can refer to a guy, but it can also be a little bit more generic. And the reason I mention that is Japanese as a language does tend to deal with more implied things, I suppose. Sometimes it doesn't explicitly say stuff, and you just kind of have to understand from context what exactly is being said, as I understand it, at a high level. Take this with a proper grain of salt. And so, to me, it sounds like you could convey that ambiguity, if it is present in the dialogue, by using the word him, his. Granted, it's more common now to use they, them for that. But I get the impression they want us to know Mr. Demon Lord is still a Mr., I suppose. Although he did introduce a transformation that's definitely even more feminine than anything we've seen. So, it could still be just playing with us. But at the same time, that's just an interesting aside, because for all intents and purposes, like I said, it feels a little weird slice of lifey, but it is kind of neat what's happening, I would say. Like, not absolutely every single individual event is, but it's still, I don't know, something a little heartwarming about it, I would say. And so far, I'm also very curious about the Closet Ghost character, because I thought maybe there was slight interaction with them in the first episode, but they're quite present in the second episode, but not interacting with anybody in any way, shape, or form. So I think they're supposed to be just an interesting background thing. And you're not going to miss them. They're always there. But it's not quite like Sounds of the Sky, where the ghosts were so damn subtle that if you go back rewatch it, you're like, that's actually pretty spooky. But no, this is, they're a background character, but just kind of I don't even know if recurring background character is even the right word, given how often they're there. So, it's kind of fun. Overall, fun show. I'm kind of curious where it's going to go from where it is, because I feel like there's still a lot of potential, although if it has any end goal, I'm not quite sure. But, yeah, fun stuff. Alright, outside of that, I think I'm taking a break from Dead by Daylight. I'm not sure for how long. Hopefully not for too long. But I've at least accepted the fact that I just don't have the energy to try to finish the Rift. And I was close to the end, so I spent like $6 to get the remaining items. It's probably a lot for a lot of people who play Dead by Daylight, but obviously, compared to anime, it's not that big of a deal for me. It'd be a bigger issue if I was doing that a whole lot. But, one time here and there, that's fine. I really need to prepare for the release of Nicolas Cage, because he, as a survivor, looks incredibly fun. Now, how much he might get tweaked between the PTB and actual release, I'm not sure. But it's very appreciable. What he is, what he's done, his presence in Dead by Daylight. I doubt Nicolas Cage would see a video like this. But hopefully y'all can appreciate me saying something like, if he ever did, he gets 2 thumbs up. Behavior gets 2 thumbs up for doing a good job of integrating it in as well. They probably don't watch my videos either, although they're probably more likely. Now, of course I say all that, and that means my bigger priority has actually been Tears of the Kingdom. Mostly because I'm trying to remember the date of everything. I know I, at least within the past week or week and a half, finally decided on what I wanted my house to look like in the game. And I have it in a state that I'm very pleased with. But at this point, let's see, I've done 3 of the main story things. I don't know if I want to say much more than that, because if you haven't played it, then maybe you don't want to know. But for those of you who have played it, you should know what I'm talking about. And I'm not sure if I can say for certain how many of them there are, because in my mind I do have an idea of what that entails. But I'm still kind of, goofing off and looking around. I think I mentioned last week that I had started the first temple, or I'd done the first. I said I was going to say a thing, and I just said temple. And I probably said temple last week. Whatever. Did the first temple, and that one was so far my favorite of the 3 I've done. But I am highly appreciative of what's been going on with this other stuff, I suppose. And I'm trying to think if I want to say certain things or not. Overall, I can just say that, I'm still enjoying the game. I'm definitely getting to a point where there's less and less exploration going on. I should probably go and collect all the Korok seeds that I know about that I haven't gotten yet. People that need to be flown to certain places, and I think I finally figured out how I'm supposed to do the flowers that look like dandelions. I've got a couple of cork pops to do, so a handful of Korok stuff to still do, but I am still also, I don't know, I still haven't done that. I have access to that. Maybe I do that tonight after I get this video uploaded and processing. I don't know. But for the most part, I'm there. Whether or not I'm going to beat Tears of the Kingdom before my next video is definitely up in the air, but I would still guess most likely not. My energy levels are not in the right place for me to guarantee that I'll have the energy to do that. I mean, I don't know if I've been wincing or not in this video, but I do know that occasional eye aches have been happening because I baked some pumpkin pie for a potluck at work today, and I enjoyed doing it, but at the same time it did kind of fill my weekend with things of not recovering as much. Especially since yesterday I needed to bake the pumpkin pie. I needed to do it earlier in the day so that it would get in the fridge and have enough time to be in the fridge and be pretty cold for tomorrow. And at the same time I had laundry to do, and the overlap, or rather the lack of overlap of a lot of that stuff meant that I didn't really get to take much of a nap yesterday, which I really could have used. And so, it's just that kind of level of stuff, but where was I going with all this? I don't know. My energy level may be that I find, there's no more sub-quests or side quests or side adventures to do, and maybe I will move on to just completing the game. I'm not sure yet. I suppose there's nothing preventing me from just doing that and then wrapping up side quest sort of stuff. Worth considering, but I don't know. Obviously, I'm still having fun playing Tears of the Kingdom. Very fun game. Very easy to get lost in, I would say, if you're... and I don't mean lost as in where do I go. I mean lost as in like... Oh, do I have to go to sleep in order to go to work? I guess I do. Let's save. It's not even necessarily some of the most compelling story stuff in there per se, but, entertaining enough. Oh, well, that's all a bunch of stuff. Excuse me. Jesus. I think this is that work potluck, still digesting. I'm not surprised. But I don't think we need to delay y'all anymore. I should go ahead and wrap up this video. Y'all, have a nice week.